Hey everyone, so if you hadn't heard the news, last Friday, out of the blue, THQ Nordic shadow dropped Titan Quest II, releasing this brand new hack-and-slash ARPG set in mythological ancient Greece into Steam's early access. Now right up front, I want to say, get this out of the way, I have really enjoyed this, but also it is very, very early access. The game doesn't offer even a fraction the amount of content some other big-name ARPGs do, like Path of Exile, Diablo, and Last Epoch can each easily keep you entertained for weeks, while Titan Quest II has about an afternoon or two's worth of content in it at the moment. Now that said, it's such a solid initial offering, the people don't seem to really mind. The setting, visuals, pacing, gameplay, and buildcraft are all standouts for me personally. Like, I've really enjoyed a lot about this game, and so do most other players apparently, as it's currently sitting at a very positive user rating over on Steam. I just gotta say, I cannot imagine if like Diablo 4, Path of Exile 2 had launched with 5 to 10 hours of content, their scores would probably be way below even a mixed. Like, what's with the discrepancy? Well, I think a lot of that is mostly up to audience expectations. Like, people didn't really expect too much from Titan Quest 2, and what is here is a nice surprise, but that's probably another story for another day. Regardless, yes, Titan Quest 2, it is clearly far from complete, feeling much more like an extended demo than anything else, but for as limited as it is, it's left one hell of an initial impression. I'm excited to see where the game goes from here, and I definitely think it will, even if it isn't quite yet, totally be worth the $30 spent. Alright, let's go ahead and jump into talking about the game. So the game is set in an open world inspired by the tales and stories of ancient Greek mythology. You play as a god-touched being hunted down by the goddess of retribution, Nemesis. The story opens up with you discovering your hidden powers and the goddess quickly attempting to smite you. You fend off some of her disciples along with a host of mythical creatures while moving through the beaches, temples, and landscapes of ancient Greece. Frankly, I gotta say the world and setting has been one of the biggest selling points for me. Like, I just adore this play space. It's really a nice change of pace to the standard setting and theming most other ARPGs go with. The whole world, the visuals, it feels a lot more bright and vibrant than what I'm used to in the genre, and I also think the whole thing has like this air of lightness to it that I also appreciate. It's also entirely handcrafted, no procedural generation, and pieced together dungeons and environments. In fact, every inch of the play space was deliberately placed, and with that, they've also put a lot of emphasis on the exploration, navigating the environment, and looking for secrets. They've got things like the heavy use of ladders and things for you to climb, as well as jumping across gaps while going about traversal. There's treasures found in just about every single corner and side path. If you have what is clearly a main path to the next area and you see something branching off in the distance, it's probably going to lead you to a treasure chest 9 times out of 10. There's also a fair few puzzles and brain teasers in the game. Nothing overly complex, but like I came across a skeleton cave where I had to light 1, then 2, then 3 torches in sequence, found in different areas of the cave. Or there was this lion's tomb with a memory puzzle inside where I had to watch and mimic the order. So first it started like follow these 3, and then there's a 4th and a 5th and a 6th, and I just kept on going for a while until it was complete. Now it's also one massive open play space. The entire world has no loading screens unless you fast travel from one location to another, but otherwise you can walk from one end all the way to the opposite end uninterrupted, and it's quite large. Like, barring the initial tutorial zone, which took about 30 to 45 minutes, the remaining 7+ hours of my playthrough was spent exploring the game's first single zone, which admittedly is all the game has to offer right now, but if they keep it up and subsequent zones are anywhere near the size, the game could be quite large. But right now it's one big open zone that amounts for like 7 to 10-ish hours depending, right? Now, beyond various points of interest in the top environment, you're also going to come across the occasional instance dungeon, catacomb, and underground layer. But yeah, most of the content is found in the above ground space. There's towns with NPCs, some of which will have side quests for you, but then beyond that, there are many side activities that you encounter as you're just exploring the environment. You're going to come across an encampment that's been raided by bandits, beasts, or a town that was overrun with spiders, or maybe you find some local villagers who got captured and turned into goats by a witch. And just walking near these events, you're going to automatically acquire the new side quest for them, which you can then choose to do or not. As for combat, well, this is a hack and slash action RPG. If you have played any other game in the genre over the past few years, you know exactly what you're getting. Left click to move your character, right click for the basic attack. Those are the defaults, with 8 additional hotkeys for whatever spells and abilities you select. The game does also have WASD support as well for fans of that movement type. While it's simple, the combat does feel rather satisfying. I think this is one of the main areas that was a nice surprise. It just feels good to move around, cast spells, click enemies, and watch them explode. The pacing and presentation has a sort of old school feel to it as well. I can't quite put my finger on exactly why, but that's the sense I got while I was playing the game. I think if anything, it's just that it's all simple. Like nothing is too crazy and too over the top. Even when I got later into my build and I had lightning bolts spewing off in multiple directions, chaining to enemies with lightning strikes coming down, even at that point, there's still a simplicity to it, and they don't overdo it with the animations and the particle effects and all of that. So yeah, I think that's kind of what the sense that I got for this feeling like almost like an old school game. In terms of character builds, this is pretty interesting. So rather than picking a class, you select from multiple masteries, the 2 that you want to specialize in. So right now, there's a total of 4 available in the game, with more to come down the road. I believe they've at least talked about wanting to have 8 masteries. Currently, what we've got though is Earth, Rogue, Storm, and Warfare. So every mastery comes with a variety of active and passive abilities that play into a single overall theme. So for example, the primary mastery for my character is Storm, and this one's themed around lightning and ice. My specific build focuses on casting lightning strikes and calling down lightning, which is all further modified and enhanced via various passives and specializations. So every time you level up your character, it's got a traditional RPG leveling system. Kill things, you complete quests, you acquire XP, you level up. With each level, you get 2 active and 2 passive points to spend however you like, with there being higher tiers of abilities that are gated behind what is known as Divinity. This is basically just throttles your progression until you reach certain points in the campaign where you are then awarded Divinity points. You spend those points in one of the 2 masteries you've selected, leveling it up, unlocking higher tiers of actives and passives. Now, what's really interesting about Titan Quest 2 though, is that yes, everyone picks 2 masteries. So after I picked my initial mastery of Storm, the subsequent one that I decided to go with was Warfare. And at that point, you were able to pick and choose whatever active and passive abilities you want from either of the 2 masteries you've selected. Now, I know just a moment ago I said my main mastery was Storm, but it's only my main mastery in the fact that it's the one that I've invested the most points into. I could have just as well dumped all of my points into Warfare. In fact, I could change it up at any time if I want, because respecking is pretty easy and affordable. So you pick your 2 masteries, you level up, you get points, you spend those points in the active and passive skills you want from either mastery, and for both your active and passive skills, they can all then further be leveled up individually, increasing those abilities' powers as well as accessing further modifications. As an example, my main damage ability is Lightning Bolt. It's pretty simple. It shoots a bolt of lightning that deals damage and arcs to hit an additional enemy. However, as I played and I spent my points, I kept leveling up lightning bolts to the maximum level of 17, and in the process, I unlocked access to 8 separate modifiers that can enhance and change that spell. And the ones that I chose include Weapon Attack, which changes Lightning Bolt from a summon spell to an attack that originates from my weapon, and the weapon of choice that I've been going with is the bow. I also picked Rage Gain, which grants a stacking damage and attack speed buff. I picked Additional Projectiles, which adds 3 more projectiles for each attack that I send out. And then lastly, I went with Lightning Strikes, which makes it so that each cast has a 30% chance to trigger a lightning bolt on my target. So there are 4 other modifiers available just for that spell alone, and many of these mods also have multiple levels to them. So every spell in the game is like this. Even the passive abilities have a list of mods that you can pick from that changes them up as you level those abilities. It's a pretty cool and interesting system for changing the base versions of spells and tailoring them to whatever sort of build that you're going after. I also have this active buff called Storm Nimbus that, in exchange for reserving some of my energy pool, greatly enhances my lightning damage, converts my bow attacks from physical damage to lightning damage, and then randomly strikes nearby enemies with lightning every 2 seconds. And then from my secondary mastery, Warfare, I've got a bunch of passives that increase my attack speed and my weapon damage overall. And I combine this with enhancing my dodge dodge skill, like increasing its distance and the number of charges, as well as taking the blink ability. And with all the stuff put together, I'm basically zipping around, spamming lightning bolts in groups that I'm shooting out with my bow and arrow, having those bolts then splinter off to strike additional targets, while lightning bolts constantly strike from the sky on top of that. It's been a pretty fun build to play. Other power progression in the game comes via your attributes. So as you level, you also get points to spend in either might, agility, knowledge, or vigor. So vigor will boost your health and tenacity, but then the other three attributes are different from what you might expect. They are actually just determining of what equipment you're able to wear, while also boosting these adjacent damage boosting attributes. So besides those four attributes, you've got might, agility, knowledge, and then vigor in the center. In between those in this triangle is fitness, cunning, and resolve. So leveling up fitness increases any strike and pierce damage, leveling up cunning increases poison and lightning damage, and leveling up resolve increases fire and cold damage. But what's interesting is you can't spend points in those three things. You have to spend points in might, agility, knowledge, or vigor, which then will increase the stats of those adjacent damage dealing nodes. So in other words, if you want to say wear caster gear, you're going to want to spend points in knowledge, because knowledge is what caster gear requires. And the higher level the caster gear goes, the higher level knowledge you need. But in increasing knowledge, it's going to simultaneously increase the two adjacent resolve and cunning attributes, which in turn increases your fire and cold damage, as well as your poison and lightning damage. It's certainly a bit different from what I'm used to in like attribute systems in hack and slash ARPGs, but it's an interesting new twist on this, if nothing else. In terms of gear, well, this is a loot game, so you're going to be coming across a fair bit of gear via armor, weapons, and accessories. I would say it's probably on the lighter end in terms of the quantity of drops that you're seeing, especially compared to something like Last Epoch. Still, definitely items are dropping fairly frequently. All of the gear, as mentioned, has attribute requirements that generally play into certain class fantasies. Like the bows that I'm using in my build have a high agility requirement, although there are also heavy bows in the game that have a high might requirement. Gear has the typical assortment of perks that you'd expect from ARPG loot, that you can increase your health, resistances, regeneration, damage output, crit chance, percent damage increases, attack and cast speed boost, etc. And then there's also color rarities going from white to green to blue all the way up, and the highest that I've seen so far is purple gear, which is called epic, and these can also have some like unique modifiers beyond the ones mentioned. The game also has some difficulty scaling, at least in this current iteration, that happens via shrines. Multiple ways to actually bump the difficulty after you reach the first major town. There's a shrine in town that lets you increase the level of enemies by up to +5 levels. You can also adjust the minimum enemy level to that of your current level, and there's an option to spend a little bit of gold to respawn all of the enemies in the zone. So in terms of what the game is structured like, well, you go in, you make your character, you play through the tutorial. In the process of the tutorial, you unlock and select the 2 masteries that you want, and then after the tutorial, you arrive on the first beach in the initial zone in the first act, which is Flooded Farmlands. You've got the main story quest. It's going to take you through the zone to the first major town, and then taking you all throughout. In the process, you'll be killing enemies, taking on bosses. Yes, there are boss encounters, I think about 3 or 4 in this first act here, as well as exploring some underground dungeons. In that process, you're also going to come across plenty of side quests to do. All the while, you'll be gaining experience, leveling up, expanding your build, and acquiring gear to make yourself more powerful. And the whole thing took me a little under 10 hours. I think it was roughly 8 hours for one character for me to do everything. I've also started a second character that I'm just a couple of hours into at the moment, just to try a different build, because while you can change up your spec in terms of the masteries that you've selected, you can't change your masteries. That is one thing that they've said is set in stone. So once you pick your masteries, that's basically like deciding the class of the character that you've picked. And if you want to make a different class of a different combination of masteries, you'll have to make a whole new character. So that is basically the game. Onto my initial impressions, starting with the pros. I think the gameplay and pacing is great. Like, it's a solid feeling ARPG. The combat, character movement, attacking, the animations, and the feedback, it's all pretty well done and a whole lot more polished than what I anticipated. Like, it feels surprisingly good. I also really like what seems to be a generally slower pacing, although that said, this is just the first act, and even the first act of Diablo 4, or especially Path of Exile 2, feels quite slow compared to when you get into the later acts, and definitely compared to when you get into the end game and the builds come online, where things get zoomy. So yes, it is a slower pace, but also it's only the first act of the game. There's no semblance of anything that resembles an end game for us to see. what the pacing is going to be like once we get to that point, so we'll have to wait and see. Something else I like are the setting and visuals. I mean, I adore the setting. I just think it's such a nice, fresh change of pace from what I'm used to in the ARPG genre, where everything is grim and dark and depressing. It's just refreshing and light, and I really like it. There's also a nice pop of color and like a clarity and sort of vibrantness to the visuals, and just like, it's a good looking game. It looks good. It looks good in screenshots. It looks good in motion. I love the setting. I love the way it looks. I also think their class system is pretty interesting, with the combining of 2 masteries to essentially form your class, and a fair few options from both of those masteries to pick from, between the active skills, the passive skills, and then all of the respective modifiers for both active and passive skills. I could see, especially once there are more masteries added, all of the different combinations that will be available could be really interesting. So I'm excited to see where the game goes as it continues to progress. And then lastly in the pros, my performance has been really good, although it seems like I might be an outlier, because from any of the negatives that I've seen talked about this game, performance was one of them, but it was running fine for me, so I just wanted to throw that out there. All right, now let's go on to the cons. First up, content. What content? I mean, it's woefully light on content. This is a sub 10-hour ARPG experience, which for the genre, that's pretty low. Now, it is the case that I loved pretty much every single minute of the roughly 10 hours that I've played, and I just really hope that they have a successful early access release and that they can bring it all home, because yeah, one major con is there's not much game here. It basically feels like an extended demo. In fact, I think some of the ARPG blasters out there finished the game in like 4 or 5 hours, and they had done the campaign. Now, I don't know how thoroughly they checked everything, if they did all the side quests and revealed all of the map. I'm gonna guess if you were at 4 hours, you probably didn't see everything, but you might have blasted through the campaign. Totally doable, especially if you also didn't bump up the difficulty, which would make it go even faster. But having bumped up the difficulty, having explored the entire map, and I'm pretty sure I did all of the side quests, it took me about 10 hours. And you know, so, but even that, like, that's not a lot of time. Like, even considering this is early access, that's a very short ARPG experience. I mean, Path of Exile 2 is an early access, and I played that for 350 hours before I put it down. So it's a very short game. That's one of the biggest cons, and I think one of the biggest negatives for a lot of people. Another con, what I would say, is the enemy complexity. They just don't really do much. Like, there are some enemies that will shoot beams at you and ones that will heal their allies, but beyond that, it's just like a generic mix of melee and range creatures for you to blow up. Haven't seen a lot of really interesting enemy interactions, so I'm hoping that changes. Just not a lot of mechanics. Yeah, I hope they add more mechanics to enemies and enemy families and their interactions as the game develops. Replayability, I mean, there really isn't much here. Like, after you defeat the final boss of Act 1, there's pretty much nothing to do. You can continue farming for gear, but there's really no purpose because there's nothing for you to work towards. Even at maxed out difficulty, with all of the enemies scaled to your level, and then also the +5 enemy levels added on top of that, it became pretty easy after like 30 minutes of farming a couple of bosses on repeat. They have like a farm thing where there's like a thing that you can interact with near the boss locations to reset the boss for like 1,200 gold or something, which it's affordable. You can sell a couple of items and get that back. So I farmed bosses for like an hour and a half, and I was just completely decked out and killing the bosses in like 10 to 15 seconds. And that was it. That's basically the repeatable content. The only real replayability, it seems, at the moment is just to start over and make a new character to try out different mastery combinations, but that's about it. So yeah, not much replayability here at the moment. Performance, now, as I said, it was good for me, but this has been the biggest negative point of criticism beyond the lack of content that I've been seeing from user reviews. It seems like there are performance issues for a lot of people. I wanted to mention that as well. And then probably my last con here is that I'm not entirely sure it's worth it at the moment for most people. Like, paying $30 for what's probably going to be a 5 to 7 hour runtime might be a bit too much money for some. Like, just, you know, especially fans of the ARPG genre, they expect a lot of time out of these games. I enjoyed it, but if it didn't get any further updates, like if they just stopped development right now, I would feel disappointed in the $30. Now, we of course expect that they will continue to get updates, especially considering that the game has been successful thus far in early access. They've done pretty well for themselves, but as of what's here at the moment, it's, you know, it's a very short experience. We just got to reiterate that. And one caveat to this, though, is that we do know that once the game finishes early access into 1.0, the price will increase. They're saying it's going to be $50. It's currently going for $30. It's even cheaper right now because I think there's a sale happening. So if you're interested in buying into the future of what this game will eventually be, totally worth it. If you're just spending $30 for only what is here right now, again, some of you could finish this thing in 5 hours easily, and I think some of you would be disappointed with that. But all of that said, as I mentioned at the top, I've nevertheless really enjoyed this, and so has the public. It's got a very positive rating on Steam, with an 84% score and over 6,500 reviews as of this recording. They have peaked at around 27,000 concurrent players, which isn't the biggest in the genre, but certainly isn't too shabby for what is here, and for, again, I think a game that there was fairly low expectations for, or people rather just didn't have super high expectations for it, I'll put it that way. Hadn't heard a lot of people talking about Titan Quest 2, and this game was shadow dropped as well, so maybe it grows with time. But they've done fairly well. Beyond the user scores and the 27,000 concurrents, they have reportedly sold over 300,000 units in those first 72 hours, which I have to assume exceeds their expectations, because this then also secured the second highest concurrent player peak in THQ Nordic's history, only behind 2021's game Biomutant. Now, as for the early access, they claim, they give the typical spiel like, hey, we went into early access, we want to make the game as best as it can possibly be, and we want to involve community feedback in that process. In terms of how long they expect this to take, they said we will stay in early access for as long as needed, depending on the feedback of our community. Currently, we're thinking about 1 year. Now, what do they plan on adding? Well, they said that the full version of the game will include additional masteries, new content and world segments, stories, and quests, as well as new supporting features to enhance the game's longevity, like crafting. They then said we plan to release these things as early access updates as soon as they are ready. The cadence of updates we plan is small updates with bug fixes, balancing, minor polish updates are going to be monthly, and major updates will be roughly every 3 months that will be adding major new features, mechanics, and or content. So that is pretty much the game. I gotta say, I would have expected a hack and slash ARPG with less than 10 hours of content to get review bombed into oblivion by the expectations that most fans of the genre have for these games. I mean, people are review bombing Path of Exile 2, and that game's got like so much content, even in its current iteration. But I think because what little they have here has been so appealing, it's been such a nice preview and taste, that people just aren't that bothered. And again, I don't think, like, people didn't have the expectation of Titan Quest 2 that they have from Path of Exile 2, especially with how devoted the Path of Exile fan base is. Like, they are really into that original game, and so the expectation and the bar for the sequel is very, very high. So I think that's why you've got a PoE 2, a game which I've sunk like north of 400 hours at this point into, is mixed ratings on Steam, whereas Titan Quest 2, another hack and slash ARPG with like 5 to 10 hours of content, is very positive. Make it make sense? It only makes sense when we consider that these are different audiences and people with different expectations judging these games by different standards. So yes, it's true, there's not a lot here, but what is here, I've really enjoyed. I had a fun 10-ish hours of playtime, and I'm looking forward to seeing more, and I'm praying that they deliver what is a complete game with multiple acts and many more masteries and a lot more content and maybe some replayability, question mark. I don't know if they've been planning to have an end game, but honestly, if this just ends up being like a hack and slash game, but not an infinitely replayable one, but one that you play for like, let's say it's like 20 to 30 hours when all is said and done, that'd be cool too. You know what I mean? They don't all have to be games you're supposed to play every day for 12 hours a day, because that's impossible to do with more than one game. So why would I need every game to be that? It's not even feasible that I could I can't play all of the games 12 hours a day. Can't do it. So like, if some of them are not 12-hour day games for eternity, that's cool. I'm fine with it. So yeah, anyways, I like what we've seen here so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing more. That does it for today's video though. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it. See you in the next one. Take it easy. I almost said y'all for a third time. That would have been something, huh? I'm not even from the South. Can you believe it?